back to week 3 of the oil painting question and answer session for you. Tonight I wanted to go through and talk to you about different types of chemicals, mediums, thinners, additives, things that I do use from time to time for different applications. I think a lot of times people find that stuff to be kind of black magic and can get a little overwhelming to what to get and to why to purchase it. So if we want to come on over here, we're going to be moving the camera around tonight so you get the movement of the live stream. So I'm going to set up in here and I'm just going to kind of go through my shelf left to right here and talk to you about why I have this stuff and what the heck does it do. So we'll start over here on the right, and for those watching this live, left, your right, my left, anybody watching this live, if you have questions, feel free to comment and I will go back and comment on that too on this video. All right, so this bottle here, basically this is just varnish, and what this is for acrylic paint. So there are different types of varnishes for different types of paint. So you have acrylic paint, oil paint. There are different type of varnish that you will use to cover that painting surface. And what the varnish does is it's like a clear coat onto the surface of the painting. So if anybody's ever painted a car or anything like that, it's generally a matte surface kind of at first. So when you paint, a lot of times you can have different variations of how that paint dries. Some can be matte and then some can be gloss. So when you put the varnish on, it's going to make everything uniform and it's going to really pull back up those matte colors and make everything kind of come alive. Over the years too, it'll also protect against dust and dirt and all those other types of environmental factors and conditions that can actually hurt the painting. So that's why you want to varnish your paintings. What you can actually do 100 years from now is you could go in and remove that varnish, get right back to the original paint, put a new coat of varnish on it, and be as if it were brand new. So this particular one by Liquitex is just a acrylic paint varnish, specifically for acrylic paint. We get into the next paint here. We got a question is, do I paint on shoes? I don't yet, but I can imagine that it would just be the same as a canvas. Like if you're working, I would think like Chuck Taylor's or something like that would be a canvas shoe. I wouldn't do like a varnish on the canvas sneaker.
Angelo has a question as well. Can I use varnish on a painting that was painted with ink and markers?
I would probably recommend checking the paper to see what that would recommend. I've never varnished a paper before. If it was on a canvas, I would imagine you could do that. I would use something that wouldn't be chemically abrasive to it. I'd probably recommend more of an acrylic varnish versus an oil painting varnish if you did it on canvas. I was actually going to get into the paper in a little bit and talk about that. I do have one of my lotions and potions here that's used for paper, and we'll talk a little bit about paper here in a second. So this is the same, moving my left to right. This one is the same type of varnish. This is just for oil painting, so just a different type of product. You can see the other one was kind of a milky white, and this is more of a golden amber color. This will dry clear. They do make the oil paint varnish in gloss or matte. I particularly prefer the gloss, so I'd like to go with gloss. Again, more varnish. Again, this is just acrylic, just a different company. Sometimes you run out of one, you find a local supply store may have a different one. So that's what that's for there. We get into some thinners. I don't use this one too much. I just basically use, I pull it up from under here. There we go. Standard odorless mineral spirits that you can get at Home Depot. My wife still says she can smell it even though it's odorless, but so I guess there is a slight fume to it, but like most things, if you work with something long enough, you stop smelling it. But you can use either one of these. If the chemicals really bother you, one of the things that we used when I was in college is we would actually use cooking oil, like corn, what am I thinking, vegetable oil to clean the brushes and things with. So you can actually treat your brush in there, keep the brush in the vegetable oil, and then take it out and go wash it under soapy water. I would recommend shaping the brush after you run it in soap and water, but if you have a aversion to these types of cleaners and their smell and odor, or someone in your family that may be sensitive to this, you can use vegetable oil as a ultimate great way to clean the brush. So we were thinking, like, you know, in school there'd be 30 students there painting, and if everybody's using mineral spirits and you got 6 classrooms with all the doors open, you walk down the hallway and it's like a Woodstock '69 concert going on out there. You know, people are flying around high as a kite off of all the fumes. So that's what that is for. All right, so again, some more varnish. We're getting the Cobalt Dryer here. This is kind of a fun product here too. What Cobalt Dryer will do is you want to use a very, very small amount of the Cobalt Dryer. In oil painting, this will actually speed up the time in which the painting dries. So when I say small amount, I'm probably talking maybe 5 droplets into your medium. And we can talk about how we make some mediums here in a little bit. What this will do is, say I'm working and I want to do what's known as glazing, where I want to put multiple layers on a painting. I might put some of this in there first. I want to dry and press for time. If I had say I was doing a portrait and the face was a foot wide, if I started here, by the time I got out to here, working that speed, I would say probably in an hour or two, this side would be completely dry to the touch, and you could build upon that layer in the oil paintings. That's what the Cobalt Dryer does. If I did not have that in there, it would actually be still wet, and I may find it mixing back into the paint. Also works good on a little bit of white. White's the slowest pigment to dry. Just be very careful if you use this, because if paint dries too fast, it can crack. So be very, very sparse with Cobalt Dryer. But a great tool if you're pressed for time, doing a glazing exercise, and need to get the painting done quickly. I'm going to pull these two down in conjunction. So this is safflower oil and clove oil. Okay. I specifically use these only for what's known as brush dip. And people go, what the heck is brush dip? All right. After you have cleaned the brush, it's not really a good idea to leave it in your brush holder because the bristles should be treated, because they will get dry, and over time gravity and things can open up the bristles, dust can get in them, those types of factors. So if you mixed up some sunflower oil with the clove has a nice scent to it. It helps complement the safflower oil. I recommend just, again, a few drops of clove oil into the safflower oil. The majority of it is safflower oil when you mix it. It is a light sensitive oil, so it can break down. So if you put it into a container, you want to make sure that you tape off the container. So I just took some painter's tape here and covered the jar with the tape, so it's kind of in the dark. What you can do too is, say you have a nice color on your brush and you think, okay, well, I got to go run some errands for several hours, I'm not going to be back. You can take that brush with the color that's on it, stick it into your brush dip, and set that aside, and it'll be good for a day to 2 days. It will not dry on you, and the color will be there for you when you go back to use it. And I think the clove oil has a nice odor to it too. So the brush dip, you can just mix it up. I just have a very little bit in the cup, not too much in there. You know, if I were to add to this, I can probably show you, do some little mixing here. I'd probably put in, you know, just a little bit of amount, just eyeball it. And then for that, I would say it's probably 1/8 of what I just put in there. I might do like 3 or 4 drops of clove. That's just clove oil. All right, put the lid on it. Just give it a shake. And actually this will get better over a day or two. So if you let that sit for a day or two, it'll actually be a better brush dip and better medium for you. You can buy this pre-made too, but that's just an easy, inexpensive way to make that. Whenever you buy these oils, they talk about the safflower oil or anything else, you want to make sure it's artist grade. You can get a lot of these things like maybe in like the culinary world or those types of or maybe even like construction. We'll talk about that here in a second when I get to linseed. But you want to make sure it's artist grade material, as it will be a lot different than the stuff that you can get through like cooking and things like that. So moving along, the rubber bands are just there. They're not part of it. Yeah, so this is interesting here. This is what they call watercolor ground, okay? And some of you may have used like gesso in the past, or a type of material to treat the canvas or the surface before you paint on it. So what the watercolor ground will do is it'll actually, this is for paper, all right? And so there's a couple different types of paper that you want to use for either be watercolor or charcoal. And what the main difference is what they call cold pressed and hot pressed paper. So I think this goes back to Angela's question to a degree. So your hot pressed paper is going to be like what you would see coming out of like a copier or printer. It's that very smooth, flat type of a surface to the paper. Your cold press is going to have more of that grain to it and matte to it with those fibers. So that people like that for watercolor and charcoal because it tends to hold that pigment better onto the paper surface. So what you can do with watercolor ground, when you put this in here and you thin this out with a little bit of water, when you put it on there, it's going to take the fibers of the paper and it's going to put them in one direction as you apply it with a brush, but also seal those fibers. So when you see like a watercolor painting and there's these very fine lines that don't bleed out, like if you were to, put watercolor on a paper towel, it's going to bleed right out because that fiber is very porous. This will actually seal the paper and keep it from being porous so you can pull a fine line with something like a watercolor mark. All right, so that's what the ground is for. And you apply that, wet it down, apply it to the paper and let it dry for a day or two. And you can do a lot more detail work with a lot more pigments that would otherwise bleed into the paper. Kind of makes a surface for you to work on. We get more, again, this is just varnish. The Gambar is just the same varnish as what we had for the oil paint. Linseed oil, all right. So again, this is made by Daniel Smith. This is an artist grade linseed oil. This is not one that you would get at like a Home Depot or something like that where you're treating your wood. What you'll use linseed oil for is if you're working on a painting and say you had to walk away from it for a day or two and the painting has become dry, you'll actually take the linseed oil and you'll apply it into a rag, and then you can go lightly into the painting surface and put an oily surface on top of the dried out paint, and then you can begin to work back on it again. What'll happen is if you can work on it dry, but what'll happen is the paint brush will kind of drag and it won't have a nice feeling to it. And this will also allow you to see the colors that you have already done, because if it dries, like I mentioned earlier with the varnish, sometimes you get that matte and gloss different drying speeds because of the type of pigment. Some dry very matte, like your browns and black, for example, will dry very matte. If you go back in it with the linseed oil, it'll look exactly like it did when you first put it on in the painting and when it was wet. So this, again, just a way to add to the paint and also see what you've already painted. That's what the linseed oil is. So you can work in fine areas. You can apply it with a brush is okay. Dab it off with a rag. Make sure that brush and rag is clean because you don't want to obviously smear colors and make sure it's dry. So this gets a dry painting back moist so you can work with it. That's what that's for. All right. So this is liquid. Liquid will help thin and cut the paint. It also helps improves drying times. What I'll do with the liquid is when I'm mixing up some paint, I will mix it in. I could probably show you. I'll do a little bit here. Let me just open it up. So it comes out. Let me shake it a little bit because it gets kind of separated over time. It's kind of gnarly. There we go. So it looks like almost like a, I don't know, gelatin or something. Let's say I want to use like my roller or squeegee tool. I want that paint to be thin, not too thick. So I'm just going to grab, I don't know, random color here. What do you want for a color?
One that you don't use often.
All right, let's go with green gold. Okay. So it comes out, it's kind of thick. This is just the oil, medium in the paint. I separate like that. But if you put this in here, this is going to make it a lot more thin and liquid. So now when you go to put this onto the surface, you can actually pull this across and smear it, and it will become different types of consistency, and you get that translucent factor, but it just allows for the smoothness of the paint. This is on glass, but just the smoothness and the movement of the paint, especially when you're using like a squeegee or roller tool to apply the paint. And again, it will dry very quick. I would say in about a day. If I left this here just like this, it would be dry. So it has a drying additive and agent to it. But I use that for doing things like my cityscapes backgrounds, because it allows that movement of the roller tool to be rolled kind of like thinning out of ink, like on an ink press, and also allows for the squeegee to do that reductive method of the paint as well. All right, so now we get into stand oil. This is just, stand oil is just a basic oil painting medium. And what I mean by that is when you're working with the paint, you don't just come right out of the tube. You can, some artists do, but I don't. I like to cut it with something so it has a little bit more fluid nature to it. When you pull the line, when you're taking the brush and you're stroking the canvas across there and you pull that line, you kind of want it to have a nice fluid feel to it. You can feel it kind of drag and get choppy when it doesn't have that. So you want to make sure that you have some type of medium to help support that. So if I'm making some medium, I can actually use a little bit. This is getting kind of low. I'll just put some thinner in here. Again, just regular odorless mineral spirit. And I just kind of eyeball this. I mean, you can measure it if you want. I would probably say 50-50 or maybe even 1 to 3. It really depends on how much oil and thinner you want to have in there. It's just personal preference, and you can add to it, take away. Just I've been doing it so long, it's more of a feel. This is very thick, and that's why you would add it with the thinner. You can see it's almost like a molasses or marmalade or something. Probably put a little bit more in. I'm just eyeballing this, squeezing it out. That's probably about right. Okay, so what again you would do is, this will get good and better over a couple days. It's gray and dirty in there because that's just years of the color mixing together. So it's got some pigment at the bottom, but that's okay. That won't affect anything when you go to use it. So again, I would put the top on. I label all my stuff just in case there's any accidents or anybody gets into anything. I know exactly what's in here for those reasons. And I'll shake this up. And then if you let this sit overnight or a day or two, it'll actually get better because the solvent in the thinner will actually break down that stand oil, and it becomes one and the same. Whereas if you just left it, put it in there, if I didn't pick that up and just left it, it would separate. So this will actually make it combine together. And now this is a great medium. So when I come off the palette, before I go into this color, I'd probably go into this to treat the brush and then come back into the paint before I apply it to the canvas. So that's the thinner or medium that I would use. This is just standard thinner for cleaning brushes. Nothing too special, just straight odorless mineral spirits in there as well. So that's pretty much the journey through my chemicals here. If you guys have any questions, or maybe my colleague in crime has some questions here.
Jason wants to know, what are you painting?
Oh, we're still working on the apple painting that we started out last week. I can turn on the overhead here to show you some of that. So we're still working on this. We started this a few weeks ago, so now we're doing all the more fine detail work within the fabric and the cloth. And you can actually kind of see some of the effect that I was talking about with the matte drying of the color. See, this has got some of that oil in it. See, this is actually the same color, okay? I mean, a very slight variation, but this is a little bit newer and that's a little bit older. So I would go in with that linseed oil, and I can bring back out that vibrancy of those colors. And if I go in once that is all done and I varnish this, all those colors are going to be evened out, and it's going to pop back to life. Any area that's gray or sunken will come back up to the surface as well. So that's what we're working on currently. I hope to have that done this weekend as well. That's it. Yeah, so a lot of different types of chemicals, products that you can get into. I found these basically to do everything that I need them to do. So, you can look at art supply stores and different types of mediums and thinners and products. In school, I've also used walnut oil before as a different type of medium instead of that thinner, and stand oil, because they didn't want to have all those chemicals in the studio and stuff. So I've used those as well.
Jason asks, do you sell your work? Do you do custom requests?
We do sell work. Right now, I'm not really doing these for anybody in particular, but they are available if anybody's interested in that. For commissions, I would look at what you have to offer for jobs and things like that, and we would take it on consideration. So if you have anything you want to send to me, you can email me at artvanpatten@gmail.com, and I will take a look at that for you too.
And Kelly said that she sees a face in the fabric to the left of the apples.
Oh, really? Yeah.
On purpose?
Maybe subconsciously, but it's interesting how our mind will always try to find faces and things. We're very good at picking out faces as a society and creature. We always, there's billions of us, so when we were a child, we always got to go find mom and dad and know what they look like. So from the jump, we've been very good at finding faces and recognizing things. Yeah. So, I hope you guys are doing well with everything out there in the world. We're just going to continue working on this painting. I can talk to you a little bit about, the process where I'm at with that, when I'm working through. We can talk about that a little bit more too. Turn on the lights so I can show you guys. All right, so what I'm doing on this painting is I put down the base colors of the fabric, and I'm going through now and I'm adding the detail. So when you approach the painting, there's basically 3 steps to creation that I call it. There's first the shape, so you want to identify the different shapes of all the elements in the painting, look at where these lines are. Then you start to block in the color. What I mean by that is you might pick a green that's kind of a middle value, brown that's a middle value, and then work your way up towards the highlight, and then work your way down towards the shadow or low light in there as well. So when I go through the fabric, I put in that shape of the line. I'm setting up the color. I'm looking at the value. What I mean by the value is a relationship of, say, this brown to this brown, and does it hold true to my source? And if it does, I've hit it. If not, I have to make adjustments. So as I'm working down through and across this, I am looking to make those adjustments, and I'm thinking the whole time. So basically, the oil painting is simply just trying to solve a problem. It's a perpetual correction of different types of problems that you're running into, and trying to fix those and get them taken care of and make it right. So I think we're going to be finishing this up this weekend, hopefully. So I should have a new one that will start, and I can show you a little bit more about what I mean by shape, color, value. I'll maybe make some videos on that. We plan on varnishing some of the older works this weekend too. I got probably 6 or 8 in the studio that I'm going to have to go in and get that varnish on. So I might be doing a video and show you guys how the color can really come back out once you varnish a painting, and how it will balance out the tones and everything like that. So I hope you're checking out the other videos too. I have some other series on my YouTube channel too that talk about various types of processes through the art, and I'm also going to be doing some reviews of some other artists that I enjoy. That should be pretty fun, right? Mm-hmm. Yep. So I don't know if any of you guys are doing anything in the the quarantine, I guess, for terms of creativity. But if you guys have picked up any new skills or learned anything new, tried out anything creative, I'd love to know about it. So if you guys want to send me a message or shoot me a photo of anything that you've been creating, could even be, I don't know, baking, or I don't know, whittling, or whatever you're into. So I'd love to check that out. I think this has been somewhat of a good thing for some people in that regards, because it gives us time to take a moment and work on things that we may otherwise not have had the time to do. So I think that's good. With the seasons changing and things, you can get outside a little bit more. So maybe some of your hobbies are outside. We've been doing more gardening and those kind of things. It's nice to see the flowers and the leaves come back out on the trees and the color. And we're driving down the road the other day, and I just get excited about organic yellow. If you're in New England, I mean, we haven't seen organic yellow since probably the fall foliage in October, so it's been a good 6 months since we've seen the fall foliage and things come through. So I hope you guys enjoy these videos. I'm going to keep trying to put these out, every week for you guys. I think it's fun. Hopefully try to keep it entertaining and not too nerdy with the oil painting talk and stuff. But yeah, so once again, that's my setup over here. The way we have the paint set up real quick is I try to put what they call opaque oil paints across the bottom. And what I mean by opaque is that they're not going to be as translucent as your transparent paint. So up at top, this is transparent paint. So when you put them down, you can actually kind of see through these colors back down into the opaque paints underneath. So I kind of have that separation, but they've been sitting kind of idle lately. I've been working primarily with the limited palette. We talked about that briefly on the last show there, but it was just Pyro Red. Let me grab my yellow here. Cadmium yellow. Cadmium's a really expensive paint, so I got a smaller tube. This tube in this size is about $90, just to give you a price comparison. It's really expensive, so I use smaller tube. Blue, black, and titanium white. So these are the 5 colors that I'm using when you see this apple painting. This is primarily it. I did find a little challenge to get some of the brown, so I did go in, cheat a little bit, and use some burnt sienna as well. So that was to make the fabric. I could get it pretty close, but I was finding it to be a little bit too much purple color. I didn't really like that. I wanted more of that earth tony brown, I think, to try to offset that green and that coolness. The burnt sienna too, to a degree, has that bit of red to it. So when you talk about complementary colors, you're going to have red and green on the color wheel are opposite of each other, like blue and yellow, that kind of thing. So I think it helps add a little bit of redness in that brown that can help act as a complementary color to the green of the apple. I think it's fun that you guys can see the face in the cloth. It was definitely not intentional. I did have a slight idea of maybe adding some symbols into the design of the fabric. That did cross my mind, or maybe doing some other things there as well. So maybe I'll do that, maybe I won't. I guess you guys will have to see if there's a Da Vinci code in the painting at some point in time. So that's it. So I think I'm going to wrap up here. We'll see you guys next week. This will be up on YouTube. If maybe you're watching on YouTube already, thank you for that. But it will be on my art channel on YouTube, which is vanpattenart.com. There's other videos up there. You can check that out. We appreciate you supporting the art here. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them. I will absolutely answer them for you. Again, appreciate your time here. And I hope you guys have a safe rest of your week, and I look forward to connecting with you next Friday.
If you have enjoyed this video, please be sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for notifications of future videos. If you have a question about art or this video, please be sure to leave a comment. Thanks for watching. Happy painting and God bless.